guys, welcome to the Stop Renting podcast. Rodrigo Posada,
Karen Berger,
Shoreline Group, Sarasota, Florida. I don't know if I said that last time, but
no,
now I did.
but that's where we are.
That's where we're in Sarasota, Florida.
Who we are, where we are.
Yeah.
Okay. Today, we are going to talk about what happens after the offer is accepted.
Cool.
Yay. Okay. Clap for that. Okay.
You got an accepted offer as a buyer or seller. That's awesome.
Excited. Woo. Okay.
Right, what happens?
What are the first steps a buyer and seller need to take once an offer is accepted?
So from the buyer side, obviously you should have a real estate agent. If you're on a buying side, a buyer's agent who's explaining all this to you, but we'll go through it.
Yep.
So the offer is accepted as a buyer. More than likely, depending on the terms of your contract, you have, at least in Florida, in our state, it's usually 3 days to do your earnest money deposit. Yep. So whatever that initial deposit that you and your agent agreed to with the offer and whatever the seller accepted the terms, so you have 3 days to deposit that unless you guys made up some other arrangement.
Yeah.
More than likely, the title company is going to reach out with wire instructions.
Mm-hmm.
Our title company allows you to drop off a check. So you got 3 days to make that initial deposit. Then you have the 7 days. I guess this works for the seller as well, so you understand what the buyer is doing during this time period. You have usually, unless you've agreed to another time frame from the day effective date when everybody signed, you have those 3 days to make the initial deposit. From the effective date, the date that everybody signed and had the contract, you have 7 days to do all your inspections, unless you agree to another period of time. So yeah, those are the first two things. So you want to be on the lookout for the title company's wire information so you can make your deposit.
So that's the number one thing you have to get ready for. Like send that wire, whatever that escrow amount is, 10,000, 30,000. Get ready to go. Get your bank details.
Correct.
And
set an appointment with your bank to do a wire. Depending on your bank, there's some banks that it's a little bit depending on how populated the area. Maybe you can't just walk in. So maybe set an appointment to do the wire transfer for the initial deposit. Make sure you have the money in an account that's easy to wire out of it. Or a check if you're going to do it that way. And
then the inspection, so 7 periods is standard. 7 days is standard. You can make it longer or shorter, depending on what you want to do for negotiation wise.
Correct.
So those are the two main time frame wise in the very, very beginning.
Correct. So the earnest money deposit, and if you don't, legally speaking, if you read through the contract, if you do not send the money to the title company within those whatever 3 days or whatever period you guys agreed to, the contract is void. So obviously there's ways to extend it. We've had times where for whatever reason we extend the earnest money deposit time frame for a day or two. But if you don't abide by that as the buyer, the contract is legal. The seller can just be like, nope, you're out of contract and tear it all up. So earnest money deposit and the inspection period. Obviously you should probably get, as soon as you think that you're about to get the offer signed or right after it gets signed, get on the phone, get the inspections lined up, because you don't want to wait until the end of the inspection period. Yep.
Have it try to schedule it as soon as possible, because there are repairs that need to be done, and you want to ask the seller to repair those. You want that it has to be done within that 7 days. Correct.
Yeah. I'll negotiate depending on what contract, but if you're using an as-is contract, you can still negotiate within those 7 days, depending on what comes back from the inspection reports. Also, depending on what type of inspections you do, say you do a general and the inspector comes back and says, hey, everything looks good, but the plumbing, this and that, usually inspectors are going to say, I would recommend you hire a plumbing inspector, so that then you have to schedule that person. So you want to get the inspections done, the general inspection, the forecourt and the windmill, as soon as possible, because then you still have more time during the inspection period to negotiate, do other stuff.
And then if you want to pull up,
you have enough time to pull up. Correct.
And then you get your escrow back. If you pass that date, then the escrow will be the seller's either way. If you back out, or if you go with a contract and you keep going.
Yeah.
So
that's a main thing. Yeah. So the earnest money deposit, if you during the inspection period, you can still negotiate and you can still back out. Hypothetically, that's your card as the buyers. You can still back out and keep your earnest money deposit after the inspection period, depending on a few other contingencies, but more than likely your earnest money is at that point a lot more at risk than during the inspection period.
Yeah,
so that's the leverage that the
seller. Those two things happen
right away,
and then you're starting to communicate with the title company.
Correct.
The title company from there takes over and does all of the lien search, title search, all the things that they need to do.
Correct.
There's some quiet time, I would say, when the offer is accepted.
Correct.
But
the mortgage is another big thing. I would think you would want to make sure that your mortgage company has all their documentation right away.
Yep.
You don't want to, I love the word lollygag. You don't want to lollygag. As the buyer, you don't want to lollygag in terms of sending paperwork and everything. Make sure your mortgage company, you're in communication with them. If you're buying with a mortgage and you're sending them all their information so that you don't get a delay with the mortgage, because that happens all the time.
It does.
And it's stressful, and it usually doesn't derail the contract, the offer, but it's just a very stressful period of time when the lender says, hey, we're supposed to close tomorrow, but now we need an extra 2 days because the buyer didn't send a W-2 or a tax from her bank account or whatever. So earnest money deposit, inspections, and make sure your mortgage company has everything they need as soon as possible.
It kind of happens fast when the offer gets accepted.
Correct, yeah.
But it's kind of like bam, 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 all the things you need to do. Can be overwhelming, but that's why you have your agent there to help you make sure you have everything, all your boxes are checked. And then from there, once you get all of that done, you're kind of like cruising until it's getting closer to the closing day, until you're verifying things. But those are the main things when the offer gets accepted.
Yeah, I would say like it's like you said it perfectly. Those first, whatever the inspection period, that's going to be like when everything goes. So just be prepared that a lot's going to happen in that period of time, depending on how long or short your inspection period is. But it's not like the offer's accepted and everybody takes foot off the pedal. Like that's the time to make sure you get everything done. Earnest money. It's communications with the title company. The title company is going to ask you for a bunch of information from you as the buyer to be able to do their part of it. So make sure you're in communication with them. Make sure you're on top of your emails, because you're going to get emails from the title company and the mortgage companies and your real estate agent. So don't think that when the offer is accepted, it's time to coast. Not yet. Once the inspection period is done and you've been in communication with everybody, then you can coast.
Yes, about a week. And then you're like, okay. Then you can kind of take a step back a little bit. Hopefully your agent's there, obviously, because you're going to have one.
Yes.
And they'll be there to help you for the rest of the transaction.
Correct.
So can you walk us through the typical timeline from an accepted offer to closing? So, okay, we kind of left it out. We said the beginning.
Correct.
So then after the inspection period, then what?
Yeah, so after the inspection period, hopefully everything went good. If you had to do a little negotiating or ask for some seller credits because something came up with the inspections, that's all done. If you ask the seller to do some repairs, they've done it. You've sent the inspector back out to look at it. Make sure that whatever was done properly, especially if it's something the insurance companies would care about, like an electrical issue. You're going to want to have some type of reporting that it was done, whatever repairs. And then after that...
I know. So after that, so really, like we said, the title company handles a lot. The mortgage company starts getting, all your docs together and starts that process.
I think the main one after your inspection period is done, I think the main one is just make sure you're staying in constant communication with your mortgage company.
The
title company as well, but the mortgage company is the main one where I see a lot of people just take their foot off of it and make, oh yeah, the mortgage guy sent me an email 4 days ago.
Because they need a lot from you. They ask for a lot from you.
And they're going to ask for documents.
All the documents.
Yes. And if they ask you the same document again, don't get upset. They do that all the time.
Yeah. Because it can get annoying, but but you have to be on it. And that's what you have to do.
Yeah. If you want a mortgage, and again, I hear it all the time. Like, Rod, they asked me for another bank statement, or Rod, they asked me for this document. Like, they need it. I promise you, there's not a single mortgage guy out there or girl who asks for documents for the shits and the gigs.
Yeah. Like, if they're asking for it, they need it. Whatever the reason be, just don't question it. Yeah. Just get back on the computer, send it to them. Yeah. They just want to check everything and make sure your finances and everything's like good to go.
Correct.
So that happens.
Yeah. I would say, depending on how tech savvy you are, open a folder in your computer somewhere and 100%. Put all the documentation in there. So whenever, God forbid, they ask for the same document again, you can just pop in there, grab the document, send it back to them. So if you can, try to stay organized with all the documentation, because I promise you, at least 1 or 2 documents are going to ask for it more than once or twice. And it's not their fault. It's the underwriter. 9 out of 10 times, it's the underwriter asking for it.
Yeah.
So.
And then, so we'll fast forward. So basically, in that time, you kind of feel like it's very quiet, not much going on, but, things are moving. You're just not, copying on every little thing, but those people are handling what they need to do. You get to the end, almost closing date.
Yes.
Awesome. You're going to do your final walkthrough.
Yes. So your final walkthrough, hopefully probably the day before, if not the morning of. So we do that a lot, like the 9 a.m. walkthrough, then go to the bank, do the wire for the final amount, and then go to signing. So your walkthrough, super important to do your walkthrough. Even if you did not ask the seller to do any repairs, still very important to do a very thorough walkthrough. Right. More than likely, your real estate agent's going to have some type of documentation for you to sign off saying, I've done my walkthrough, I'm accepting the house as is. That's, to be honest, that's for the agent to cover themselves, because they're helping you purchase this product. So you want to know exactly what you're buying before you send the money, before you sign any all the closing documents. So walkthrough, super important. A lot of people think it's a formality. It's really not. You want to go through the house and check
everything, turn the lights on and off, open, close doors, do the sinks, all those things.
Yeah. Make sure that it's a formality in a sense, but it's not, also because you want to make sure that nothing crazy has happened. And we've had it. the washer and dryer, like that's a huge one. Like in the documentation, in the MLS form, it said that the washer and dryer was going to stay with the house. We do the walkthrough.
Where'd it go?
Where's the washer and dryer? If you, and this is for, I guess, agents out there, if you do not fix that situation right away, you are then responsible. You should be responsible for that washer and dryer or whatever appliance. So that's a huge thing as a real estate agent and as a buyer. You want to make sure that whatever appliances were meant to stay with the home are with the home.
Yep.
Funny story, when we bought our house, there was like a little whatever, like a, I don't know, we call it a nook in the kitchen, and they had this really nice wine fridge. And then it's in the pictures and it was there. But when we bought the house and we did the walkthrough, we didn't realize they swapped it out for like a little college beer cooler thing. So we got gypped.
You do have that.
Yeah, but that
was supposed to be a wine cooler.
Yeah, it was a nice wine cooler. Yeah, so we didn't know that. Our agent didn't say.
Sneaky.
Yeah. So, again, I had listing agents take stuff in front of me and for closing. So be super cognizant of whatever whatever was agreed to when the offer was signed originally, and whatever was on the MLS form in terms of appliances, anything that's structurally attached to the house, it's still all there.
Yep.
Because once you send the money and once you sign, at that point, it's just, you could, if you really wanted to, you could go back and sue the seller for whatever, washer and dryer or whatever, the fridge, but it's a lot more difficult. Whereas if you do it before, and we've done it, be like, hey, your buyer's agent should call a listing agent and be like, hey, this and this is missing. What are we doing? We're not gonna close if this is not done. There's escrow holdbacks, which is something that the title company basically, everything could be done and signed, but the title company can delay sending the money to the seller if there's something sketchy going on, if there's something missing or some issue hasn't been resolved. So the walkthrough, again, sounds like a formality, but it's super important. And make sure that your agent is, again, a good experienced agent that knows what they're doing and knows what to look for.
So they do that, and then, like you said, that was a rant, but that's good. All very informational.
It's my third coffee today.
He's jacked up. And then obviously you send over your wire, closing funds, to the title company, and then you sign all your documents, whether you're in person or you do it electronically, because you can do that here, depending on some different scenarios.
Usually, if you need a notary, then it usually has to be in person. But if it's like a cash transaction,
you can just do it online. And then once they get everything signed from the buyer or the seller, funds are there, they're ready to close, then you're closed. You get the keys and you get to go to your new house.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's about it. That's about it. So. Getting 10. Okay.
I think that's it.
I hope we're not forgetting anything. What is the role of escrow in the post-offer process, and how does it work? True, because sometimes a lot of people don't know what escrow is, or what does this mean, or where does the money go, who gets the money.
Correct. So escrow, you can either call it escrow funds, EMD, earnest money deposit. Basically, it's the initial fund. So when you go to submit your offer, you're going to say a purchase price, whether it's cash or financing, and then there's going to be a secondary number, which again, the initial earnest deposit. It's the amount of money that you put initially to basically secure the property. So this is used as the buyer saying, this is my skin in the game. This is my ticket to whatever this offer that we're doing. Obviously, the higher it is, especially with cash offers, if you put a substantial amount of money down, it makes your offer stronger. So that's one of the tools as a buyer's agent that you can use to present a better offer is a strong EMD. Strong just meaning higher. It's something that can be negotiated. So I've had clients say, hey, I only want to put 1,000, and then the seller comes back and be like, nope, we're not going to accept this offer. Your purchase price is fine, but we need a higher earnest money deposit, because it also does protect the seller in case of a bunch of things that we can talk about.
A bunch of things,
yeah. So the earnest money deposit is sent either via check or wire to the title company. So that's a huge misconception. People think that you as the buyer are sending that money to the seller. No, all funds are held by the title company in an escrow account. That's legally, that has to be the way it's done. And then so the title company holds that money. We've talked about this in other episodes where you want to have an agent as a buyer's agent, because if you make a mistake in the contract, then once the title company, they're lawyers, most of them, they have that money. They're not going to let it go back to you unless there's a legal reason within the contract. So a lot of people think, oh, the title company, I'm paying for title, they're going to just send me my money back. No. They're lawyers. They're going to read the paper. They don't care what you have to say respectfully, but they're going to go by the contract. So so it's held by the title company, and they will only send it to the seller once the contract is closed, or if you as the buyer, you made a mistake and you fell out of, you failed your part of the contract. and you gave up your earnest money deposit, then they can send it to the
part of your like if it's at 340 and your escrow is 10,000,
correct,
then obviously you're going to owe 330.
Correct.
So like
it goes towards your closing costs. So.
Yeah, it goes towards it all. But like Rod said, the higher you go, it can be a negotiating tool and more appetizing to the seller, because if you were to back out past inspection period or something, then they get to keep that because they've been off the market for an X amount of days, and that's just how it is.
Yeah. No, and it's there to protect the seller and for the buyer to have skin in the game. So
and show you're serious.
Correct. To show you're serious, because if you can wire whatever $5,000-$10,000 within 3 days, and that's more. If you're showing up as a better buyer than saying, hey, I don't think you can do. I don't zero earnest money deposit. I've never seen it. But even if you're saying, $500, $1,000.
It doesn't look as strong. And it looks like why, if you're especially cash, like if you have all this cash, why, what does it matter?
Yeah.
Like if you're ready to go pay for so
it is important. And if you don't think, if your buyer's agent tries to get you to put a little bit more money down initially, don't think it's anything bad. It's just so your offer shows up stronger to the seller.
How does the home inspection fit into the process, and what should buyers expect?
So usually it's 7 days roughly, I think. Yeah, whatever it is, the amount of time you can negotiate, it's in the terms.
You can negotiate. Yeah. You can't, depending. You can always push it out if you need to.
Correct.
Or do it quicker and do like 5 days.
Yeah. We've done a lot of 5-day inspection periods. Nothing to do with the house. It's just so we show up stronger as buyers.
Yeah.
And usually if you can have your inspector there the next day, you still have 4 or 5 days, depending on weekends, to get all the inspection stuff done. So during the inspection period, depending on what type of contract you're using, if it's an as-is contract, during the inspection period, you can negotiate all you want. You can still back out and keep your earnest money. Depending on the price point and the area that you're in, you might use the other type of contract, which is called the standard contract. That one's a little bit trickier because you as the buyer have less recourse to back out. The inspection period, there's sections within the standard contract that designate how much money the seller would theoretically give to the buyer depending on what issues are wrong with the property. And that's a pre-negotiated amount. There's 3 sections, and it's pre-negotiated whatever amount the seller could give to the buyer if the buyer can prove that they need it. Most times it's an as-is contract, which gives the buyer more opportunity to negotiate during the inspection.
Because then you can say, the sink needs to be repaired and the shower needs to be, it's leaking a little bit or something.
Electrical issues.
Then you could ask the seller. They don't have to do it, but most of the time they'll agree to if they want to keep, keep going their contract to keep it. And then, like you said, the standard contract, what's the standard amount most of the time you put up?
It's a percentage. Yeah.
Percentage. So sometimes you can do like 1,000. So it can be up to 5. Depends on the purchase price. But you don't see that too often, but people do sometimes request it. Yeah. Like a seller says, I only want a standard contract offer to come in.
It's usually when the house is in a couple of millions. I think I've seen the highest I've seen an as-is contract is I did one the other day for 2.2 million, I think, and it was an as-is contract because again we felt it was better and the seller didn't push back, and I thought it was a better option for my buyer, and it all worked out. One thing that I have been seeing, and I hope this goes wide, if once you sign the contract and you're under contract, you're technically pending. If your listing agent doesn't put the property as pending on the MLS, they're breaking rules. I've seen this. I don't know why. We're in Sarasota. There's a lot of agents. I've seen it in Orlando, and I've seen it from Miami agents that sell here in Sarasota. That's bad. You should.
Bad.
So what they're trying to do, so the public understands, they have a signed offer. They're going through the EMD process or the time frame. They're going through the inspection period, but they're still showing the property as active, meaning that they're lying, basically saying that there's no contract.
Know, if you're a buyer, this is active, and then you would have no idea it's pending.
Correct. So if you're a seller and your listing agent is doing that, again, you can. I don't think you can get red flag. I don't think, and I understand why they're doing it because they want to
they want to have more backups. Yeah, and you can. That's when you go pending, and you can write on saying accepting backup offers. That's very standard, very normal. But that only means. And I sometimes have people say, what do you mean when they're accepting backup offers? Could someone come in higher than my offer and then they take it? Yeah. It's like, no, that doesn't mean that only if something falls through, then they'll have these people that are still interested. They can call up and say, hey, this fell through. But it doesn't mean if someone comes in higher price than you or something, that means that they can just go ahead and accept that one instead of you.
Which we've had at other times where we are under contract and somebody else does as a buyer side, and then somebody does come in with a higher offer, and then you'll see the seller try to do things to get you out of contract,
right? Because
so
they can take
the
money,
higher offer. Yeah,
but
yeah. Moral of the story being though, once you're under contract, ethically speaking and legally speaking, you should demonstrate to the public that the house is pending. So if your listing agent is trying to wait, I'm waiting for the EMD deposit because then it's serious. That's not correct. That's illegal what you're doing, and you can get, depending on your MLS, you can get fined. So yeah, it's just something I've seen 3 times already in the last few months, and boiled my blood.
Really? Yeah, that looks like you want to call the listing agent and be like, "What are you doing?"
No, I did. And
did you?
Like, oh, yeah. She's like, no. She's like, "What are you talking about?" My favorite one. I've been doing this for 30 years.
Oh,
I'm like,
then what are you doing?
What are you doing? It was illegal 30 years ago. It's still illegal. I love that. I've been doing this 30 years. That's cool.
Well, wow, you've been doing
illegal shit. You've been doing illegal shit for 30 years.
Literally. Okay. What happens if issues arise during the inspection, and how can buyers and sellers resolve them?
Again, depending on the contract. If it's the standard contract, there's a specific amount of money. You as the buyer have to then get, I believe it's like a contract. You have to get invoices that demonstrate how much money you need to fix this specific issues. And then if basically negotiate just the amount of money, you really don't have the option to back out. As is offer, you hold the trump card of being able to be like, hey, either give me what I want in terms of seller credits or repairs that you, the seller, do, or I'm going to back out and I'm going to take my earnest money because I'd still protected during the inspection period.
Right.
So that's why I prefer to use the inspection period. It's prefer to use the as-is contract depending on the value of the home, because it puts the buyer in a better position during the inspection process.
Yeah. Because sometimes there could be a lot of repairs that need to be done, and but you still have you can still back out if you want to, but you present it to them, and most of the time they will, or maybe they'll do like, we'll do this, but like this one big item, we'll give you a credit for it or something. It's
part of the negotiation. And I've heard some listing agents like, oh, I don't negotiate during the inspection period. Cool story, bro. You do.
What? Yeah. Do you have another offer, or like you only have my offer?
If we're the only offer, then you're going to negotiate with us because X, Y, and Z is wrong with the property. We found it during the inspection period. And again, it doesn't mean you have to give us everything, but certain things we're going to negotiate, whether it's a seller credit or this repair, that repair.
And that's really when you hope you have a good agent that can work with the listing agent, whatever their personality is and however they are to work with them. But if you have a good, strong agent, they're gonna work it for you and make it, so they can be happy, both parties can be happy, it can be smooth, and everything can keep moving forward.
Yeah, and I think this is another very important part that people don't talk about. You want within reason, you want a buyer's agent that can look through the inspection reports and know what they're looking at.
Yeah.
And because there's certain things that might just seem like, oh, that doesn't matter, but it's a big issue. And only somebody who's experienced and trained and has done a few transactions can realize that, hey, that's going to be a big issue. Now that we have the seller on the hook, for lack of a better term, let's get them to fix that because it could be an issue in 3 or 4 years.
Right.
So it does. And to Kara's point, you want a buyer's agent that's respectfully and nice and whatever, but can negotiate. Yeah, and it's not just going to get walked over by the listing agent.
There's always a nice way to handle things. Okay, you can worry. You can, sometimes take the high road, but still get the job done.
Kara takes the high road more than I do. Obviously.
Yes, I do, but I do it with class, and I know what I'm doing. Okay. So, what's involved in the appraisal process, and why is it so important for the buyer and the seller?
So we talked about it in other episodes about when you're on the selling side and you overprice the house, what can happen if the appraisal comes back low. You as the buyer, obviously, if you're doing a mortgage, if you're buying with a mortgage, the mortgage company is going to want to do an appraisal because they're lending out hundreds of thousands of dollars. So they want to make sure that the asset, the house, is worth whatever your negotiated price is. So that's another thing to look out for. The inspection, it's one of the few things that you pay for outside of closing. Usually, sometimes they can write it in there, but it's usually a couple $100s. So the mortgage company is going to reach out to you as a buyer and say, hey, we need whatever, $400 or $500 to schedule the appraisal, to pay for the appraisal. It's one of the main things. It doesn't happen anymore, thankfully, but it was one of the main things during COVID that derailed a lot of contracts. Was the properties came in undervalued, and then the mortgage company said, "Hey, we're not gonna. We're only gonna lend at 360. You're at 400. Figure it out between you and the seller." So the appraisal is super important. Something to look out for. It's usually done maybe a week or two before closing. Make sure you pay for it. I have had contracts delayed because the buyer didn't pay for the appraisal on time.
Oh gosh.
So that wasn't ordered. So then once it's done, it usually takes a day or two. So be on the lookout for your mortgage company.
For that. But if it comes in lower than like what your offer is.
Correct. Yeah. Then it gets kind of tricky, which is why you would hope that the seller didn't overprice the house. The seller and the listing agent didn't overprice the house, because if, again, for easy numbers, you're under contract at 400, appraisal comes back at 360, that $40,000 has to come from somewhere.
Yeah. Either
you're going to lower the purchase price, or I've had it sometimes where the seller say, hey, I'll do 20, but then you need to come up 20 as the buyer. So the good thing is, when that happens, if an appraisal comes in super low, you as the buyer are in the controlling position, because if you and the seller cannot come to an understanding, technically speaking, that lower appraisal can be used through the financing contingency to eliminate the contract, and you get your earnest money back, because again, there's a part of the contract.
The only other time, really.
Correct. Yeah. It's called the financing contingency, and it basically means that the financing falls through for whatever reason. It could be the day of closing and the financing falls through because you as the buyer did some weird credit thing, or the appraisal came in low, or whatever happens. If you can prove with it's called a letter of denial from your mortgage company, you can use that letter of denial, send it to the listing agent, and then you use that letter through the financing contingency to back out. You get your money back, your earnest money back. So that's one of the only few times that you can also back out, unless there's other contingencies. But that's
like the main big one.
But appraisal is very important. But again, if it comes in low, you as the buyer and the seller have to negotiate it.
But if it comes in high, great.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I love when that happens.
Like, heck yeah.
Like, you negotiate it down to like 380, and whatever, it comes back at 400. Like, you walk in, you as the buyer then walk in with built-in equity day one. So that's a big thing.
You're like, that's right. How can financing issues affect the process after an offer is accepted, and what options are there if problems arise?
Correct. So the only real thing that can come up, again, unless you as the buyer do something crazy with your credit, or you buy a car or a ring, or all the things we've talked about that can damage your chances of getting a mortgage, main thing that can come up is the appraisal, which we talked about. If it comes in low, then you have to find where the difference has to come from somebody, either the buyer or the seller, because it's not going to come from the mortgage company.
Right. Yep. What documents and paperwork should buyers and sellers expect to review and sign as they approach closing?
So the main things, it's going to be the income statement. No, whatever the document, I can't remember the name. Sorry. The document that the mortgage company sends you as the buyer, that's going to have a breakdown of all your fees, commissions, taxes, yada, yada, yada. So you want to review that. You want to make sure you understand everything that you're paying for.
Yep.
Especially with all the conversations we've been having about commissions. You want to make sure that you as a seller are paying what you thought you were going to be paying.
Yes.
You as the buyer, if you agreed to pay some part of the commission, or you didn't. So the document, I've seen people just, hey, yeah, I reviewed the mortgage documents, and they did it. So take the time, because it is, even if it's
a lot, but it's important to read through it and make sure everything makes sense and everything is exactly what was discussed.
Correct. You understand exactly what you're paying for, and there's nothing, because people can hide stuff in there. People being mortgage.
Like, what is this fee? What is this for?
Correct.
Yeah, call them junk fees.
Junk fees, yeah. Get your mortgage guy or girl on the phone and go through it line by line and say, hey, what is this for? What's that for? And your agent can probably help with that too. But from the title company as well. Yeah, the title company. So there's going to be fees from the title company. There's going to be fees from the mortgage company, the state, and document stamps and all that good stuff. So there's fees from.
It's all on the settlement statement that you review.
That's the word.
The settlement statement. Yes. That has like all the the doc stamp fees and everything that you're. It's pretty easy to read. Yeah, it kind of lays it out for you. Yeah. But if you have any questions, that's when you ask your agent.
Correct.
And you can ask the title company too.
Correct. And then like the day before closing, you're probably going to get that settlement statement. At the bottom, it's going to have cash due from buyer. That's the amount of money that you need to send probably either the day before closing or the day of closing. And that's the final cash to close. Right. That you need to send. So that the settlement statement provides you all that information. But yeah, review all the fees, make sure you understand exactly what you're paying for, and ask questions.
And then once everything's been signed, you get to keep it all and keep it in that file.
Correct. Yeah. Keep all that documentation in case.
It's always good to have.
Always good to have.
Can you explain what a final walkthrough is and why it's crucial for the buyer? So we did kind of talk about this, but you know, like in more depth. Yeah. Why it's crucial, I guess.
Yeah, just make sure you know exactly what you're buying. So when you signed that offer originally, you thought you walked to the property, you saw things, and then you did an inspection period, and then you agreed at the end of the inspection period, like, I'm purchasing this exactly how it is right now. And then depending on how long your contract was for, this could be a month later or 3 months later, whatever it is, you want to make sure that what you're purchasing is exactly what you thought you were purchasing when you did the initial inspections, and
everything was fixed that you guys both agreed upon that was going to be fixed.
Yeah.
That's the main thing.
Yeah. And I've seen wild stuff. Again, look at the appliances. It's funny, but it's happened. Make sure the washer and the dryer and the fridge and the dishwasher and the microwave, everything that you thought was going to be there is there. Legally speaking, anything that's physically attached to the house, like bolted down, any of that stuff should stay with the house unless there's another prearranged terms or whatever. If there was furniture that you bought with the house, make sure that's all still
leaving
there.
all the furniture. I'm leaving the couch and the bed. The buyer and seller agree to your purchase. But you make sure that's there at final walkthrough. So you're gonna have probably a checklist of things just to make sure.
Which again, your agent should be there to help you with that, and they should know it's within reason that your buyer's agent should be helping you or telling you, hey, let's look at this and this and that. I've heard some buyer's agent oh, that's not worth my time to go. I don't believe in that. I think I do it, and most all of our agents do it. Just go through the walkthrough. It shows that you care, and then you can avoid issues. You're helping
them out, and you want everything to go smooth. You don't want your client to call you because they're freaking out over something, and you weren't there to help sell them down and say, hey, it's okay, or it's
everything's gonna be okay. But so
what are the last question? What are some common surprises that can come up before closing, and how can both parties best handle them? That's what we were kind of saying.
Washer and dryer.
Things are missing that weren't supposed to be missing.
Correct. Or whatever, say the seller's out of state and he thought he hired somebody to fix something that you as the buyer asked them to fix and it wasn't fixed. We've had that happen. We talked a little bit of escrow holdback where the title company delays sending the money to the seller until whatever little issue is fixed. So just do the walkthrough, but if something does come up and something's missing that is a big enough issue that the buyer doesn't want to sign, the buyer still has some authority at that point, even if it's the day of closing, to delay the process, and depending on who their mortgage company is, they can still derail it and use the financing contingency to back out.
If everything's in writing, but if nothing's in writing,
there's parts of
it's a tough area, but that's when really the attorneys step in and say, this is what's legal.
Depending on what's wrong with the house during the walkthrough, Have had it where the title company steps in and says, hey, that's a big issue, we're going to do an escrow holdback, or that's a minor issue, it doesn't
it sucks, but
if the house is dirty, you can't really do it. But if there's a couple $100s worth of appliances or whatever, something major is damaged, a window is smashed, or the roof has whatever it is, if it's something big enough, you as the buyer and the buyer's agent can go to the title company and request some type of grievance. So as the seller, obviously, until you get the money in the account, make sure the house is up to standard.
And your listing agent should be making sure everything's ready to go, because they want it to get closed. They want the seller to be happy. So making sure everything on both ends are good to go for closing, so there's no surprises, because nobody likes surprises.
And definitely the listing agent should probably do a pre walkthrough.
They should, if they know they're going to be coming the day before closing. They should probably go the day before you get there. Make sure everything looks good, everything's there, and not do any sketchy, sneaky stuff.
Correct. The water and the power should be on. So I've seen that where the seller turns it off, again, because the listing agent didn't tell them. But the water and the power should be on for the walkthrough. So if you're selling the house, make sure that you put your disconnect for the electrical and the water and the utilities after closing a day or two, because if the buyer's agent really wants to be difficult and they do the walkthrough and there's no power and there's no water, technically they can't really check everything. So I've had that happen, where we delay closing until the power and the water is turned back on by the seller under the seller's money. So then we as the buyer can go back in and do a proper walkthrough. So water and power should remain on through closing, even if you're paying for it as a seller, because if not, it can delay closing.
It can, and it's important.
Because it doesn't allow the buyer to do a proper walkthrough.
Exactly, and that is it.
I need more coffee. That was wild.
All right, another coffee. Bye.
Thank you, guys.